Hello gamers, this is Timber here. I want to talk a little bit about the games that I played this year in 2025. And I don't know how you guys feel, but for me, I feel like 2025 was an absolute banger for gaming, and I just am really excited to talk about the games I played this year. Now, not all these games are games that were released in 2025, but there are quite a few that were released in 2025, but I'll clearly make that known before each game. But the way it's going to work, I'm just going to talk about each game kind of briefly and put them in a tier list of overrated, underrated, and fairly rated. And so the general criteria to my tier list here is, my first criteria is I had to have beaten the game or played a decent amount of the game. Now, playing a decent amount of the game doesn't mean there's sort of hour requirement, because I think some of these games you can beat in under 40 hours, or there's really no beating the game. Like in Battlefield 6, you can beat the campaign, but if you never played the multiplayer, I feel like you're not really giving good description and accurate analysis of Battlefield 6. And the same with the finals, which has no campaign and is all multiplayer. And same with Arc Raiders too. And again, these aren't objective facts. You may have a different opinion than me, but I do want this to be a dialogue on the Metacritic score and just talk about the things I liked about these games and did not like about these games. And I'd love to hear you guys' responses to my critiques down below. And I wanted to part from a traditional tier list system from S to E or whatever you may do, you know, double S or whatever, because I feel like a lot of times those tier list systems don't really capture exactly what I want to talk about. And I hope I can give a little bit of nuanced take on these games, because I think it's hard to make a tier list when you have so many games from so many genres, from strategy games like Victoria 3 or an FPS shooter like the finals. It's really hard to put them in tiers for me. So hopefully with this system, I can kind of give a more detailed description of what I think about these games, rather than just saying, oh, it's good, go play it, or it's bad, it sucks, you know? But with that said, I will give the people what they want. And at the end of this video, I'll give my top 3 games that I've played this year and just give a thoughts of like why they're in my top 3. All right, so without further ado, let's start with the first game, Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 was released by From Software on March 24th, 2016 in Japan, and April 12th, 2016 worldwide. Dark Souls 3 was the third installment, as the name suggests, in the Dark Souls series, and is often known as probably one of the better games of the Souls series in general. Now, while Dark Souls 3 is the third game in the Souls series, it is not the third game in the general Souls genre that From Software has created. And if you never played any of the Dark Souls games or Souls genre in general, these games are really known for their difficulty and being a relentless experience. And so people who play these kinds of games probably enjoy overcoming overwhelming odds. So if you like more of an easier theme park kind of game, I wouldn't say this game is for you, and that's completely fine. But if you like the challenge, if you kind of like grinding to get better at the game, this game is probably up your alley. And what makes this game really rewarding is when you beat the boss, when you beat the areas, it's just very rewarding because the developers really don't throw you a bone in any way. No, they'll give you some things like they'll show you that there's a weakness to this boss, so that maybe a boss is weak to bleed, for example, or it's weak to frost or whatever. Those will really help you in a boss fight, right? And that's something that you would want to know and maybe do some research online to know the boss. But when you finally get that boss down and you get the air of fire destroyed across the screen, it's just really rewarding, and I love every second of playing this game. Now, it can be really frustrating, especially I'd never played a Souls game before, and so this is my first official Souls game. I really loved it, and I really am glad that I played this before I played some of the other games like Elden Ring, Demon Souls Remake, Nightreign, because I feel like I got better as time went on in every single one of the games. Now, there's differences, of course, because this came out in 2016, and those games came out later, so it's not exactly the same, and you can really tell that this game is now 10 years old, you know, but I still think it's a beautiful game, a really cool looking game. I wouldn't say the graphics are perfect, you know, but it's really cool, dark fantasy vibe, very mysterious, very just badass looking. The gameplay loop really doesn't get old. You know, you go through each levels, gathering runes, going through enemies, and then finally getting to that fog door to fight a boss. And I really enjoyed my time in this game. And again, I really feel like what sells this game for me is overcoming the odds. You know, there's no bones thrown at you. You become better to beat the game, and beating the game isn't just you're done with the experience. It feels like an accomplishment, and I really appreciate that when games do that. So Metacritic has it at an 89. It's right around there. I think that's about right. However, I don't think I would rank it lower than that at all. I think it deserves a higher rating, probably 90 plus. I think I feel comfortable with it being clearly in the 90 above range, because in no way in my mind is this game a B plus. It seems it's like an A minus or above. So I really enjoyed my time with this game. I think it opened up a whole new genre for me, which I'm very appreciative about. And ultimately, I'm gonna have to put it in the underrated tier. All right, so next up on our tier list is Elden Ring Nightreign. Elden Ring Nightreign came out on May 30th of 2025 worldwide, and it's developed by From Software as an extension of the Elden Ring franchise. But even though it's an extension of the Elden Ring franchise, it's really nothing like Elden Ring at all. This game is multiplayer focused, okay? Now, a lot of the combat mechanics and stuff is exactly what you would expect from any Souls game, you know, and it's very similar to Elden Ring in that way. But there are major differences between Elden Ring and Nightreign that really set it apart. And I think it being multiplayer focused by nature is the obvious huge difference in this game. But other things that, such as the characters themselves all having abilities and you using those abilities against the bosses, and you kind of have to rush through the map and stuff because you have this battle royale like ring closing the whole time, really makes it totally different experience. But I think it's a cool change of pace for me, because it really allowed you to play these games with your friends in an easy manner, which is something that I don't think is very intuitive in the other Souls games. And I'm not really knocking the other Souls games for this, because in Elden Ring itself, you know, the proper Elden Ring game, you have to summon in players, but only before the boss. And then once you defeat the boss, you are summoned out. So you can't really play Elden Ring like in a full co-op mode. And it's honestly quite hard to summon people. It's not really easy to do. You'll see, if you go on YouTube, you can just look up how to summon. There's a ton of videos on it. And in my head, there would not be a ton of videos on it if this was a completely intuitive system, you know. But Elden Ring Nightreign is a multiplayer focused game, so it's as easy as just inviting your friend to the game through the Xbox or PlayStation multiplayer system. So Elden Ring Nightreign sits at a 77 on Metacritic with a lower loser score in the 6s. Usually it changes over time, and especially throughout the time I've been making this video, but I just think that's way too low for this game. The bosses and the combat mechanics are fun, and they're from the previous games that everyone loves. So from that aspect, this game should not be knocked for any of the gameplay loop, in my opinion. Now, I think the big wrench in the gameplay loop is when you start to kind of add the boss rush feel to, like, you have to rush through this game to make sure that you can get to max level to fight the final bosses. And the final bosses of each expedition, I think, are really well designed and challenging, and you feel very rewarded when you actually get that victory signal at the end of the expedition and you overcome the boss. And I feel like it's the same feeling to overcoming the bosses in previous From Software games. But of course, I don't think it's as hard, because you have this whole multiplayer component with the character abilities. And I think just by its very nature, it's going to be easier because you have someone can carry you through the expedition, right? And so the feeling I think that Souls players chase with the feeling of achievement and reward after defeating a boss, I think you could get a modicum of that feeling with defeating the bosses in Nightreign. But I do not think it's even close to the kind of achievement and feeling you feel when you defeat Elden Ring, for example, or you finally defeat Melania. It's just, you're not really comparing things that are the same, you know? But if you are a competitive player and wanted to give this game a shot, there are things for you to do. For example, the Everdark Sovereign bosses, they are a harder version of the original bosses that you would fight in the game. So like the Trocephalus beast, that the first boss you have to fight to unlock all the other bosses in the game, that has an Everdark Sovereign mode where the boss is harder, and the end fight that of day 3 is different. It's harder. And once you defeat the Everdark Sovereigns, you can unlock another more challenging experience with the Depths of the Night, where there are Everdark Sovereign bosses all in a row and you go until you can lose. Okay, and that's another challenge for very competitive players, and there's a leaderboard system and a whole community around those depths runs. So overall, while it's different than probably any other game that From Software has ever made, I do think it is a good game and definitely deserving more than the 77 rating it gets on Metacritic. And of course, I have a general appreciation, I guess, bias for this game because me and my friends have just loved and adored playing this game this year, and it's really been cool seeing them jump into this franchise, the Souls series, with the combat mechanics and everything with Nightreign. So I have appreciation for this game. I think it's worth 77, and I understand how it is different, but I have to put it in the underrated tier for my tier list here. So next up on our tier list is Death Stranding 1, the Director's Cut Edition. Death Stranding 1 is an action-adventure game developed by Kojima Productions in partnership with publisher Sony Interactive Entertainment. Its director is Hideo Kojima, who is known for his success in the Metal Gear series. The game was first released for the PlayStation 4 in November of 2019 and followed up by a Windows port in July 2020. A Director's Cut version, which is the version I played, was released for the PlayStation 5 in September of 2021, with releases for Windows in March 2022, iOS, Pad iOS, and Mac OS in January 2024. Amazon Luna and the Xbox Series X and S, you can play this game since November 2024. Now, the whole reason I picked this game up personally is I wanted to play Death Stranding 2. I was traveling a lot at that time for work, and I decided to pick it up on my Steam Deck as kind of a game I could play while traveling. And what a decision that was, because I really enjoyed my time with this game. The big thing I can say about the game is I think the general consensus around this being a walking simulator isn't necessarily wrong, and I understand the criticism. However, I think this game really picks up 5 hours into the game, 5 hours into the story, especially if you play the game. When you reach Port Knot City and something happens, I don't want to give it away, I think after that moment, the game really launches off, and really you get a bunch of stuff. You get new vehicles, you get weapons, you get all sorts of things that can help you along your journey. And when you get all these things, all this equipment, I think it makes the game way more enjoyable as opposed to the first part of the game where you're just walking. You don't really have much to help you with your tasks that you are assigned, your quest. And the premise of the game is this Death Stranding entity, these things are terrorizing the world. They have come down, and if they get close to you, they will cause this tar-looking sea thing to form, and basically it will kill you. And if you die kind of out in the wilderness or even anywhere, your body will start to decompose and turn into something called a void out. So a void out is basically like a nuclear explosion. And so the world has been plagued with this whole situation and all these void outs happening. And not to give the plot too far away, it's all because of this certain extinction timeline that is occurring. Okay. And at the beginning of the game, it's really confusing because you don't really know what's going on. They're instilling this creepy vibe, this mysterious vibe at the beginning to hook you into the narrative of the story, which really picks up as you meet each character throughout the game. And the chapters are actually named after characters, so you will understand the overarching plot and what has happened, what is going on with each of these characters that has contributed to the situation we are in right now. The game is very cinematic in a way that the narrative is very, very well done. All these actors are top tier actors, and you can really tell through the game. Like it really seems like you're watching a movie, but it's not like a quick time game like the Walking Dead game where you just like press X constantly, right? There is a gameplay loop with the delivery system, with the third person shooting, fighting, with the vehicles. There's all that. You're playing something, but there's also this great narrative that you can watch and these great cutscenes that are in the game as well. And the soundtrack and the music really makes this emotional feeling as you're traveling through the post-apocalyptic United States. In this, it's really just all of it together really makes you feel like you are a part of this world, and it makes you feel very connected to the characters that you're playing. And I think it sparks an emotional feeling as you play through the game, as you watch these cutscenes, and I think that's just fantastic. So for me, I think this game is great for the narrative direction, and I think after that first 5 hours, which you do have to take into account the first 5 hours, I don't think that may have been the best way to hook people into the game. But after that, the gameplay loop also is fun. but I think the narrative is the big takeaway for me with this game. And it sits at a 85 for the Director's Cut edition, and I think the first edition is an 83 on Metacritic. That seems roughly fair, but I think it does deserve beta. I would give it probably an 89 or 90 because of how fun I had with the game, and I really fell in love with the combat system and the vehicles and the kind of the gameplay loop that they created with Stranding and then built on with Death Stranding 2. But not to mix them here, I really had a good time playing this on my Steam Deck, and I just think an 85 is probably too low for this game, so I'm gonna have to put it in the underrated tier. And I recommend it. I mean, you can play this on anything, guys, so whatever you want to play this on, I just give it a shot. Be patient with it at first. I understand the criticism at first. I promise you, once you play the port not mission and get after that and you start to get stuff and you still don't like it, totally fair. It may not be for you, but I think after that point, it really picks up. So just give it a shot, and I'm putting it in the underrated tier. Okay, so next up on the list is the Demon's Souls remake. Now, as I said earlier, of course, this is a remake from the original From Software game that came out for the PlayStation 3 in 2009. And this is known as really the first installation of the Souls genre. It's not the first Dark Souls game. That was Dark Souls 1, then there was Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3. But Demon's Souls was at the time a standalone game, and kind of was the start of the Souls genre. Now, Demon's Souls being the start of the Souls genre, I think deserves some credence. However, I think the big thing for me in this game isn't like necessarily the swing of the sword mechanic or the dodging mechanics or the magic mechanics or anything like that. I think it's really about the boss design for me. And to me, it just feels like each boss in this game has some sort of gimmick that makes it hard, such as the man-eater bosses. The whole reason that they're hard is the platform that you're fighting on. And that's valid and cool in a way, like that. I'm not saying that's a necessarily bad thing. Okay. Now, but when every boss has some sort of gimmick, I don't think really that's a good thing for boss design. I think a lot of the things that make bosses great in the Souls genre, and I could be wrong, y'all could disagree with me, is the nature of their moveset themselves. Now, the arena you're fighting in could be a huge part of the difficulty of the boss, like kind of the strategy that the developers are thinking you should take to beat the boss. And I think a good example of this in other Souls games would be in Elden Ring, you fight the snake Rykard. That arena is designed in a way where you need to pay attention to where you are to defeat the boss. And the same thing in Demon's Souls remake, where you have to pay attention where you are to beat the boss for the man-eater's boss. But I think when you have too many gimmicks like that in the game, when the bosses are too designed on the gimmicks, I think that is a negative for boss design. And I think the most egregious example of gimmicks for this game is the Storm King boss fight and the Storm Ruler sword that you'll get to fight the Storm King boss. And really what the Storm Ruler does is it allows you to hit the Storm King from a distance, and to me it just makes the boss fight really easy, and it takes away the accomplishment feeling you get from beating a boss. Now, why is that so important? I think what makes these games so fun and so rewarding to play is overcoming the difficulty, learning the moves of the boss fight, learning the boss itself, learning what it's weak to, and then overcoming those odds to finally vanquish the boss and get those runes or get those souls and level up your character. But if the boss is designed around some sort of gimmick, kind of like the King Alien boss fight where he steals your levels, and that's the whole reason he's hard, I don't really think that's good boss design in my opinion. I think good boss design is kind of like the Nameless King, where he has swings and moves and dodges, jumping on the dragon, swooping down. All these things I think would make the boss fight fun and good. And I would say the same thing for the final boss in Alchemist Wukong 2, which is a different genre. I'm hesitant to say it, but I think what makes that boss fight hard is he has multiple different phases. Like, you'll get him down, he'll do it again. He has more than 2 phases. I think you have to fight him 3 or 4 times to finally beat him, and that's the whole reason he's hard. So I think it can be good, but it's not what makes it great. And I think that really just sums up my opinion for Demon's Souls. I think it's good. I don't think it's great. Okay, I do think it's fun, and I think if you got PlayStation Plus, you definitely should download it and give it a shot. You have nothing to lose. But I do think the Metacritic score of it sitting on a 92, I think it should be maybe fairly rated. I have it fairly rated here, but I could see arguments for it being lower rated. I think it's a great remake. It's beautiful. The graphics are beautiful. The sound effects, as I've said earlier, are fantastic, and the soundtrack, cinematic, all that stuff is really well done. So I think it's a really good game. I just don't think it's better than a lot of the other Souls games, which again, it was the first in the genre, and I think I would expect that. So Demon Souls, if you have PSN, give it a download. I'll put it in the fairly rated tier, and we'll be on to the next one. All right, next but not least is Clair Obscur Expedition 33. All right, so Clair Obscur Expedition 33 was released by developer Sandfall Interactive, published by Kepler Interactive on April 24th of 2025. It came out on the PlayStation 5, Windows, and the Xbox Series X and S. Now, this game is a role-playing game, so you'll level up your character over time and go through the story, making sure your character is strong, and you can defeat the bosses better. But what makes it different to me, I've never played this kind of game before, is that it's not just one character that you're upgrading. You're upgrading a whole team and a whole expedition of characters, and each character has certain things that they're strong in and certain things that they're not strong in. And it would clearly show you what each character is better at. Like, some characters are better at some spells, some characters are better at others, some characters are better in certain situations, can take more damage. And so all that lets you devise a team that can really help you get OP through the game and beat the game in a very efficient way. And for me, I've never played the Final Fantasy genre before. I've never played the Persona series either. And I think it's just, this year has been a year of opening new doors for me for gaming, jumping into new experiences. And maybe that's why I liked this year in gaming so much, because man, I was really pleasantly surprised with this game, and I loved the whole story behind Sandfall Interactive being not being a AAA studio and kind of being a newcomer onto the scene and completely blowing everyone out of the water. I mean, if you watch the Game Awards, they won nearly everything from best soundtrack to best game, just like a total sweep through the Game Awards, and I think they deserve it. I mean, they did a great job. Now, my game of the year actually is different, but I'm not bent out of shape by them winning the game of the year. I think they deserve it. I mean, the people spoke. They won their game of the year, right? But for me, my personal ballot is different, and we'll get to that later on in the video. But I just think I had a really good time with the game. Now, there are some critiques that I think make it not my game of the year and ultimately make me put it in the fairly rated tier. But it's hard to put it in the fairly rated tier and to say like, oh, it's a mid game, because it's not a mid game, but it's rated at 92 on Metacritic. So I think that's about fair for this game, if not maybe a little bit more or less, but I could see a little bit more down to based on my main critique with the game, and it's the graphical clarity, I guess, of some of the things. Like, some of the characters' facial animations seemed a little off to me in some areas, especially the last area you're in. There were some like rocks and stuff that didn't seem like they lined up right. Like, some of the environment didn't really smoothly line up from a graphical sense. Like, it wasn't purposely broken. Like, it's not like a rock platform, right? Which I would I would obviously understand. Like, that was the design. It looked like there was like a glitch in the rendering. Best way I can explain it, it's like kind of like a Minecraft chunk that's not loaded. It looked like that. There was like a gap. And I'm tempted to play this on PlayStation 5 because I played this on my PC because I have PC Game Pass, and you could just download the game. You don't have to pay the full price. And I want to support these developers, so I probably am going to play this on PS5 too, but I'm interested to see if I have the same graphical errors, because I'm wondering if my computer I played it on is not enough, like if it's too low of a power to handle that game. But I think the big divide with Expedition 33 and the gaming community, whether you like the game or think it's overrated, is going to be whether you like the turn-based combat or you don't like the turn-based combat. Nevertheless, I think it's worth a shot, especially with a Game Pass. And I think with that, we're on to the next one. All right, so our next game is not a game that came out this year, but is a game that I played this year. And it's God of War Ragnarok. God of War Ragnarok is an action-adventure game developed by Santa Monica Studios and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment, and was originally released to be an exclusive for the PlayStation 4 and 5. It is the second installment of the Nordic mythology track that God of War has gone on. Now, the original God of War series does take place in Greek mythology, okay? Because Kratos is in the Greek mythology, so the Greek gods like Zeus and everything like that. The first games are all about that, but with God of War 2018 that came out, they started this whole new track with the Nordic mythology. So Kratos and his son are in this whole Nordic mythology arc, And the game very much feels like the culmination of that Nordic arc, even though it's the second game. So it feels like the big grand finale of the Nordic mythology arc that Kratos and Atreus have been on since the 2018 game. And the game really ties up all the loose ends that we experienced through the first game. Now, if you played the first game, there should be nothing really different about the combat mechanics. Everything kind of flows the same way, and I think they really mastered the flow of the God of War system that they created with the 2018 game, because they kind of created a whole new combat system for that game, and they built off that with Ragnarok. So here's the deal with Ragnarok. I think the combat mechanics, okay, and the weapons that you use are better than the 2018 game. It feels more fluid. It feels more refined than the 2018 version. However, to me, man, this game, I think, it's hard to say because I really like this game, but I don't think they nailed the narrative like they did in the first game in God of War 2018. Now, here's my bias that I'll share with you guys, and that's, I think I have a hard time rating sequels higher than their original counterpart. And I don't really know why that is, but I think I do get kind of defensive if I really like an original game and then there's a sequel that comes out for that game. In a way, I'm excited about the sequel, but it's going to be hard for that sequel to live up to what I experienced with the first game. And so that's my bias for you guys and why I don't like Ragnarok as much as I like God of War 2018. And I think about big criticism of the narrative of God of War Ragnarok is that it just seems like Kratos is a little bit timid, and he's not really the God of War like we know him. He just seems kind of out of character and plays out of character most of the game, which I know they're trying to kind of create this new, wiser Kratos character through his experience with this Nordic storyline, and I understand that, and I don't necessarily disagree that any of the way that Kratos has become is bad. Like, I think it shows that he has grown as a person and is learning to be a wiser, softer person, a good father, and those are great themes to have, and I respect Santa Monica Studio for instilling those themes into their game. But to me, it just seems like God of War 2018 is a little bit more true to the source material and to who Kratos is or has been through the years since the God of War series started in 2005. So I think just for me, I like 2018 better in every way except the general combat mechanics, because I think it's a little bit more refined in God of War Ragnarok. Outside of the Atreus missions, I really do not like those missions at all, and I want to kind of forget about those when I'm reviewing this game, because I think that's a big knock on this game, and I don't really have much good to say about it, and I know some people enjoy it, but the difference between being Kratos and being Atreus is in like the fun level that you have when playing with each character. I think it's vastly different, and I think Atreus is far, far less fun to play as than Kratos, and it's super noticeable when you play those missions. You're forced to play those missions, by the way, and it's just not something that I think should have been in the game, and I understand why it is for the narrative purposes of Ragnarok, but I feel like it would have been better served with a cutscene, and if they just had you play as Kratos this whole time. I think they did it because they're trying to set up an Atreus sequel, but they shouldn't have done it at all, and I think it's a big knock again for Ragnarok and why I think it's not as good as 2018, and ultimately I think it's going to be in the overrated tier in that. And the Atreus missions, for me, it just makes me have to pump it down a peg, and so that's kind of what I think of God of War. Let me know what you guys think, and we're on to the next one. All right, so the next game is Battlefield 6. It was released in October 10th, 2025, so this year, by Battlefield Studios and published by Electronic Arts, EA. And as many people know, the Battlefield franchise, since I would say Battlefield 5 with that World War II adaptation, even though I like Battlefield 5, I think they really have had a hard time retaining their player base. And I think there's a group of diehard Battlefield fans that will play it no matter what, as Battlefield 2042, the game that came out in 2021, even though it was probably the worst Battlefield game in recent memory in the franchise, I think towards the end of its life, it started to get a following, and people kept playing the game that, those diehard Battlefield fans. And so with Battlefield 6, I think it really catapulted Battlefield back into the mainstream and to compete with the likes of Call of Duty and other FPS shooters. And if you've been watching the channel, you'll know that I'm an FPS shooter guy. Like, I grew up playing Battlefield 3 back in 2011, Battlefield 4 in 2013, Battlefield Bad Company 2, all those games. I love Battlefield. Now, I'm not going to claim that I'm the best Battlefield player ever. I'm sure there are so many gamers that are better than me in Battlefield, but I do love this franchise, and I do love to see Battlefield 6 kind of in a return to form to the original Battlefield formula, or at least the Battlefield formula in Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. I think it is most similar to those two games. And really the setting of Battlefield 6 is, I'd say, most similar to Battlefield 3 and 4 because it is in the modern setting, okay? Now, 2042, I would say, is also kind of in the modern setting too, but of course, as the name applies, 2042, you are in the future a little bit. So there is that kind of aspect, but it is not anywhere near what Battlefield 1, which is World War 1, and then Battlefield 5, which was World War 2. You know, that is a totally different era, right? Really, the big difference isn't between the eras and like when the setting is between this game. It's really all about the gunplay specifically, which I say feels a little bit more fluid than some of the previous Battlefield games I've played, especially Battlefield 2042. The gunplay is a complete improvement in my opinion. Same thing with the destructive environments. It is an improvement on Battlefield 2042. However, I would say the major difference between Battlefield 6 and the other Battlefield games is guns are not locked to specific classes, okay? So in the traditional Battlefield sense, you have an assault class, engineer class, a medic class, and a recon class. And the assault class was more of the assault rifle class. Engineer was SMGs and guns like that. The medic class has LMGs and guns like similar to that, heavier guns, you know, and then the recon class was always the sniper class. But in Battlefield 6, they turned that on its head and you can kind of play whatever class you want with whatever gun you want. Okay. Now I kind of get why they did this because I think it's more of like a freedom of play the way you want, craft the character you want to make and kind of have play style you want to make, and we're not gonna, you have a favorite gun, we're not gonna just completely cut it off from the class that you're best at. I get that, but I think it makes some classes kind of useless. Like for example, the assault class seems kind of useless, even though you do get a shotgun with your weapon or another, you can trade out the shotgun too, but you do get that. But it feels like there's just a lot of other ways to play with the traditional assault guns, so the assault rifles, putting them in other classes like medic or engineer, and you're just more useful to your team, in my opinion. Now I'd love a Battlefield veteran to get on in the comments and tell me like what they think about this, because I'm actually really torn. I could be convinced either way, but that is my experience trying to play assault and using, you know, the traditional assault weapons, and even with the shotgun in the secondary spot, I still think assault is very weak in Battlefield 6. So basically the point of all this is I don't think there is balance between the classes with this gun system in place. Now, everything else from the map to the destruction, I think is really well done in Battlefield 6, especially with the destruction. I definitely think it is a step up from Battlefield 2042. But in my opinion, I think it's actually a step down from Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. And it feels almost weird to say that. Like, how can Battlefield 6 that came out this year have a worse technical destruction than Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, which came out more than a decade ago? But really the reason I think I've formed this opinion is due to my time playing The Finals, which is a game made by Embark Studios and former Battlefield devs. And the two games really are different. You know, The Finals seems to be a sandbox arena shooter, whereas Battlefield 6 more is a large-scale sandbox, but it's a battlefield, like large-scale warfare, you know, a bigger map that's going on. So obviously I'm not saying, you know, the destruction should be exactly the same. But when you think about just blowing up a wall, that kind of simple mechanic of the wall falling down or the hole going through the wall, it feels like The Finals is a little bit more polished in the way the structures crumble, the way the wall has a hole in it, the way it falls down. And there's also some parts of Battlefield 6 where there's just like safe spots where you can't destroy anything, you know, and they don't really advertise well which walls are destructible and which walls are not. It seems kind of obvious sometimes, but there will be points in the maps where you're like, oh man, I wish I could really blow this wall up and flank the enemy. But it seems like, you know, that's not what the devs want you to do for probably some sort of gameplay reasons, such as spawn killing people and, you know, blowing up tanks right when they spawn, stuff like that, I guess. But that is you know, that's kind of the experience as the player as you go through the map. It limits your access access to other parts of the map. Whereas with the finals, you can blow up the entire map if you want to, blow every single building off the map and just have like a straight flat surface if you wanted to. Now that would take a lot of work, but I just think overall the destruction system is a little bit of a disappointment for me in Battlefield 6 when I compare it to other games like the finals. But when I compare it to Battlefield 2042, which was the game right before it and almost destroyed Battlefield in my opinion, I think it's better and I'm satisfied. So it's kind of more of a perspective thing for me. Am I thinking about this in Battlefield improving over time, like in the recent scope, or am I thinking of it in gaming as a whole? So overall, Battlefield 6 sits at an 83 on Metacritic, and I think that's about fair, so it goes in my fairly rated tier. Okay, next up is the most underrated game I think on this entire tier list, and a game I'm so excited to talk about. I wanted to talk about this game for so long, and I was thinking about doing multiple videos about this game, but nevertheless, it's The Finals by Embark Studios. So the best way I can describe The Finals is it is a free-to-play first-person arena shooter sandbox. Now, the main game mode is called Cash Out, and how the game works is you are trying to cash out the most money possible before the time runs out. And as time goes on, there will be more opportunities to get more money. So in the beginning, you'll have smaller buckets of cash that you're trying to collect, and then towards the end, it kind of ramps up and you get more. It's like your last chance to get to qualify for the next round. And why you want to qualify for the next round is the original game mode is made in a tournament bracket. So the whole purpose of the game is to reach the finals and ultimately win the tournament. In the original game mode, there are 4 teams broken off into 3 players. So you're 4 teams of 3, and each player can choose one of 3 classes. And those classes are light, medium, and heavy. So the light class is the fast-paced, get in, get out character. If you like playing fast, if you like getting in, getting a couple shots in, and then getting out, that is what the light is good for. Now, it is also a sniper class. So if you like sniping, the light class is for you, but it really is all about movement with light. You know, you can go dash fast on the ground, or you can have a grapple hook and sling yourself up to obscure places across the map. That's what light is all about. So if you like that kind of play style, there's an option for you right there with the light class. What you trade is you do not have a lot of health. Now, the medium class is the more balanced class, and I see it typically used more as the medic kind of class because of the defibrillator gadget that is available for mediums and the healing beam that's available for the medium class. And obviously they're not as fast as the light class, but is quicker than playing heavy, and you can play it in an aggressive way if you want to. There's options available for that. Like you can play defibrillator, which allows walls to disappear and reappear with your gadget, and there's guns that you can use that are, I'd say, are more aggressive, like the shotgun or the fire shotgun. Those are probably more aggressive weapons because they need to be at close range. Or you could play at range and use the FAL semi-automatic gun, your typical assault rifles, which I think are more balanced mid-range guns. The medium is kind of what your average person would play, I would think, when you start the finals. It's like your normie Call of Duty character. It's everything you would expect playing an FPS, I think. Whereas the light is kind of different because it's quicker, and the heavy is more tanky. You know, it's just a different feeling when you're moving the character, when you're actually interacting with the gunplay, in my opinion. But I think Embark Studios does a good job giving these different classes their different weapons and having them, especially with the medium class, having them being able to play in different places, aggressively or more defensively if they want. It just helps you figure out, oh, how do I want to interact with this character? How do I want to interact with this class? And how do my teammates want me to interact with the environment as well, based on who I'm picking? And that just adds another element to this whole grand strategy of the game with your teammates. And it's really fun if you get 2 of your friends on, you're all kind of stacked into a game and you're strategizing, you know, how each game goes. It's really fun to me to put together each class and put together each person's loadout. It's just and it's not too in the weeds, you know. Nothing's really too complicated, you know. You're not gonna get a super busted weapon just because you're level 100 and some other guys is a level 4. It's all even when you jump in, besides probably some of the sites that you can unlock with leveling up and all that. But it's a very even playing field, and strategy and thinking ahead to your attacks or your defenses will help you tremendously in the finals. So I don't think that heavy class needs much explaining to do because it's pretty self-explanatory. They're more of a defensive character. I'd say it's a heavier, slower character with more health than light and medium. I guess you could kind of describe heavy as more of the environment changing class because they have a lot of options in their arsenal to change the map completely, to destroy things, to knock people off platforms, to completely knock a building off the map if they want to. So they can radically change an area and completely change the strategy and the points of attack that you're going to make depending on what the heavy does, obviously. So outside the classes and the strategy, really how the way the guns feel and the way the environment feels, the way the grenades feel, throwing them all that together, I think just makes for a really fun gameplay loop. Now, I would say the time to kill is a little bit higher than you would expect in other FPSs. Besides the light class, when you're fighting against them, they have the least amount of health in this game, but I could see people getting frustrated with the time to kill with the heavy and the medium because you got to hit your shots on those, especially if you're like having an average assault rifle. The heavy will probably take more than one clip to kill. Now, as I kind of alluded to, I love the maps and environments in this game. I think they're really well done. I think Monaco and Sister Horizon are probably my favorite maps in the game, with Kyoto probably being my least favorite just because it's so spread out, but I still love that map too. And I just think the way you interact with the environments and the way things look, it's a really beautiful looking game actually, and really well done. You can see the arena at the top of everything's like kind of in theme with the finals, and I just really appreciate that. And it doesn't feel like a cheaply made game. Like, it feels very AAA to me, and I mean that in a good way, not in the recent AAA struggles that we have seen. Whereas actually I think this year has been a good year for AAA, but it's they've kind of lost their thunder there for a little bit, but I mean that in a positive way. This is kind of a smaller studio, but I think they really oversold on their product. I think they really over delivered, and it being free to play, really, I don't think there's any reason not to try this game out. Like, if you have a couple hours on a weekend or something, download this game and give it a shot. Like, jump into quick cash, which is a little like, it's like cash out, but it's a little smaller of a time commitment. It's really quick game mode, kind of get your feet wet, maybe jump into team deathmatch to understand the gunplay and like each class and how much health they have, and then jump into cash out. And I promise you, like, you guys, if you like FPS shooters, I think you really would like this game, and I would highly recommend it. It sits at an 80 on Metacritic, and I just think that's criminally underrated. Like, I know it's not a really known game, and it's really kind of fallen off since its release, and especially since the release of Arc Raiders 2, which they're not really anything like that, but I do think that's criminally underrated for this game, and I love this game and will continue to play it and think it deserves way more than an 80, so it's going to go in my underrated tier. Well, if you made it this far in the video, you're relatively at the halfway point and thus probably need a little bit of a break from me yapping. So I'm dedicating this intermission to my favorite video game series of all time. Alright, so next up on our tier list is Arc Raiders, developed by Embark Studios and released October 30th, 2025. Arc Raiders is a third-person extraction shooter, and the main gameplay loop is you will jump into a couple of different maps. There's multiple different maps, from desert kind of looking map to a more lush mountainous map with blue gate, and so there's a lot of diversity as far as what you're looking at, and the graphics, they're also beautiful. So there's a lot of diversity in that instance. You're not just jumping into the same map each time, but when you jump in, you're encountered with kind of a post-apocalyptic environment where this apocalypse is caused by these robot things called arcs. Okay, so the Arc is the PvP enemies in the game, and then all the raiders are the players, so they're the user players in the game too. So if you encounter another player in the game, it's going to be in the form of a raider and not an Arc. And really, that's what's great about this game, is in encountering other raiders, and I think that's what's made this game so popular. And if you just go on YouTube or Reels or Shorts or TikTok, you'll just see all these encounters unfold and the funny things that happen, and I think that's what makes gaming great. And I think that's also why I talk about like bringing back lobbies, bringing back encounters with other gamers, because I think that is what has been missing in a lot of these modern games. And even games like the finals, which Embark developed, there's no like lobby with the other players you're going to be playing against. You're just thrown into a game, you play and you leave. So I think there's a lot missing there, and I think this social aspect has really allowed this game to completely take off. I think another input to the overall formula that was successful for arc raiders is, yeah, you have these people that you can interact with through proximity chat, which is not new. Like they didn't create proximity chat in gaming, but I think the way that the arcs interact with you and how hard they are, it's not like super easy. Now you can get used to some arcs and learn like their weaknesses and everything, but if you're going after the matriarch or the queen, you have to team up with other players, or you have to be really good and strategic to defeat these arcs. It's not just like you're running into a game and the PvE enemies are kind of slouches. Like it's super easy. It is a good challenge, and I think they really nailed the difficulty slider of the arcs themselves. Now, there has been some criticism around this game in the form of the AI usage for the voiceovers on various different characters and the raiders' interactions with the other players. Like if you're not having your proximity chat on, there are voice lines that you can toggle, kind of like an emote, to say like, hey, don't shoot, or hello, or yes. And this really isn't the first time that Embark Studios has used AI, because the commentators in the finals, like the voice commentators of the finals tournament that you're playing in the game mode, they'll give you like play-by-plays of what's going on. Like the ultra rares just got knocked out, the socialites just took the lead. They say that kind of stuff in the game, and that's all done through AI voice acting. And so since then, I've kind of been conflicted about this, because I'm generally not really for AI voice acting, because I think it sucks the soul out of the art form. But if I would have never researched and found out that the voice actors in the finals were AI, I would have never have known. So these AI models are pretty freaking good, and it's getting really hard to tell what is AI and what is not AI. In the finals, I could not tell, but in Arc Raiders, I definitely can tell that the voice acting is AI. Now, that just may be because I'm looking for it, but I can't really remember if I knew that these voice actors were AI when I first started, but I definitely did think that they sounded a little off than the commentators in the finals, which sound smooth and really realistic. But the usage of AI should be regulated, and it should be disclosed. And I understand that Embark is a small studio, but even if Embark's using it, these bigger companies like Bungie and Activision Blizzard, they're going to use it too. So I just think disclosure and regulation surrounding the usage of AI is needed, especially as it's going to just get better and better and better over time. So Arc Raider sits at an 86 critic score on Metacritic, and I think that's quite fair, so we'll go into my fairly rated tier. All right, next up on my list is Elden Ring, developed by From Software. Elden Ring was released on February 25th, 2022, and is really the next iteration in the Souls genre. The best way that I can personally describe Elden Ring is I think it is Dark Souls 3 on steroids. In Dark Souls 3, it is a more linear experience. You can go through the starting bonfire of a specific area, and at the end of that area is always a boss, whereas in Elden Ring, it is a more open world format. Now, there are some areas within that open world that do feel more like your traditional Souls game. For example, Stormveil Castle is one of the first places that you'll go in Elden Ring, and it is more like a Dark Souls 3 map, the castle itself. But the big twist is that castle is inside a greater open world, so you can just run away from the castle and go to completely other stuff, and it just gives you a wide range of adventure feeling to this game that I think was not in Dark Souls 3 and even Demon Souls remake as well. And I don't think I really have a bias towards level-based games or open world games, and I don't really rank either. Like if it's an open world game, I won't rank it higher just by the nature of it being open world. But I do think here they really mastered the feeling of adventure that I think open world games should instill in the player. And for example, like in Red Dead Redemption 2, I thought they did a good job with that as well, because there's a feeling of adventure and intrigue as to each little area and point of interest that you're going to. And what's cool is even in Red Dead Redemption 2, there's little Easter eggs hidden throughout the map in random places that cause an interactable situation to happen with the player, which I think is really, it makes the game feel more real. It makes you feel more immersed into the world. And the environments in Elden Ring are absolutely gorgeous. My favorite personal areas in Elden Ring are Nokron, the Eternal City with all the starry looking night area. It's really like eternal looking. as the name suggests. It feels like you're in space surrounded by stars. And then my second favorite area is any area underneath the Erd tree where you can look up and see the glowing gold branches over you. It just feels really epic and legendary, and kind of like you're inside an epic tale, like where there's gods and demons that you're fighting and everything, which is what this game's all about. And so I just think they do a really good job with the environment and making you feel epic, like you're part of a legendary story, which you are in Elden Ring. And I'm going to have a really hard time finding anything negative about this game. It sits at a 96 on Metacritic, and I think that's about right. I don't think any game can be an 100 tier, game, like 100 out of 100. I think that's really, really tough to do. And also, based on people's different preferences, I think it's going to be really hard to even put any game at 100, no matter how great it is. I'm an FPS shooter, and I think in 2001, I probably would have wanted to give Halo CE a 100, but now we know that that's probably that would be overrated, So I just think that it is a really good game, and if you're getting into the Souls genre, this could also be a good option for you, as I said with Nightreign as well. But Elden Ring could be a good option for you because of the open world, and I think if you get stuck on a boss, you can just go on to the next one. And also, I think grinding runes is a little bit easier in Elden Ring than some of the other Souls games where you're grinding souls to level up your character, become stronger, and it will basically make the bosses easier for you because you can do more damage or you can have more health. So those things are just easier in Elden Ring by the nature of the world design. And so if you're thinking about picking it up, I'll recommend it to everyone. But I will say, if you don't like Souls games, you don't like the challenge, then this game just won't be for you. For me, I think it's one of my favorite games of all time, and I just could not put it down when I started it. And every good thing that people say about this game, I think is absolutely accurate. Some of the negative things, I think that if I had to say, the multiplayer system, I just wish it was more intuitive and you could just play this in a proper co-op mode with your friend. I think it's just a little too difficult. I think the summoning enemies thing, though, is fine, but it is really frustrating when you're trying to play this with your friend. And I'd rather them just say, like, hey, it's not a co-op game, than have that system in place. And they fixed this with Elden Ring Nightreign, but again, that's a totally different game. So maybe, hopefully in the future, I'm optimistic it will just be a little bit easier to summon in your friends, but that is a big negative for me with Elden Ring. Nevertheless, Elden Ring is one of my favorite games of all time, and I think it deserves the 96 score on Metacritic. But sitting at a 96, I think that is already pretty dang high, so I put it in my fairly rated tier. I don't think that there will ever be a 100 out of 100 game, and that's just because I think we are all human, and developers are human, and we have little things and little negatives in a game. And so while it's not at that 96, I don't think it's overrated. I don't think it's underrated. I just think it sits right there in the fairly rated tier. And at a 96 and A+, I think that is completely in line with my experience of Elden Ring. Next up on our list is Ghost of Yotei, released by Sucker Punch Studios and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. Ghost of Yotei was released on October 2nd, 2025, and is an action-adventure game following the events of Sucker Punch's 2022 game, Ghost of Tsushima. However, Ghost of Yotei offers a new protagonist in the form of Atsu, a mercenary who is on a revenge quest to kill the 6 people who wronged her family, the Yotei 6. The setting is northern Japan in the medieval ages. So most of the combat loop is sword fighting with katanas. You also get a spear. You can unlock different weapons. There's this really cool weapon called the Uchikatana, which is a huge katana that you can use to fight bigger enemies. And so there's that. There's also rifles, and there's also this chain with a ball on it with a sickle all attached together. And that was my favorite weapon in this game. It's really satisfying, especially when you have groups of enemies. You can swing that thing around and hit them all at once. I found that a really good addition to the game. Now, this departs from the Ghost of Tsushima stances system, where depending on who you're fighting, you would want your character to be in a certain stance. The same theory applies here, it's just with different weapons. And so if you like Ghost of Tsushima, I think you would like this game a lot, because I do think the combat is a huge improvement on the first game, and I think there's just a lot more options for you to fight your enemies with Ghost of Yotei in this different weapons system that they have. Now, this game has received some criticism for Atsu, the main character, being, kind of a protagonist, and I'd say there's been like a whole woke crowd who thinks that this is just done for diversity purposes. But they really actually do a good job. I was kind of skeptical at first because I've seen some of her other work, this voice actor's other work, especially in Apex Legends with Valkyrie. I found Valkyrie one of the most annoying voice acted characters in Apex Legends, and it is just crazy cringe. But I actually really enjoyed her performance in this game, and I thought it was really, really well done. So I have to tip my cap to her for that. I'll also say the story was better than I thought it would be, because I frankly was kind of a hater of this game for a little bit there, and my friend brought me back to reality. But I think I was just twisted because I miss Jin in Ghost of Tsushima, and I really wanted to see how that played out. But I do think that this story in Ghost of Yotei was pretty well done. I don't know if I like it better than Ghost of Tsushima, though. I really, really liked the ending of that game, and I felt like the ending of Ghost of Yotei was kind of predictable and played out in other Sony games before. The most similar, I think, is Horizon Zero Dawn. I think the endings are kind of the same, in my opinion. But I do think that it was a good ending, and it was a satisfying ending. And I hope they do DLC, because I will play that DLC too. So I'm not knocking it, but I do think it was not as good as Ghost of Tsushima. And just to clarify, that is in terms of the narrative of the game, not the overall game. And again, that would just maybe my sequel bias, I don't know, but I do think that's just kind of how I felt after the game ended. Now, I do think one thing I'm interested in seeing is how the Legends mode for Ghost of Yotei works, because I think they built something pretty interesting for Ghost of Tsushima and the Legends mode in the co-op. So I would really like to see if they build on that with Ghost of Yotei. And I think if they do, I would be very comfortable in putting this in the underrated tier, because I think that would be I think it's going to be really, really fun to play this with friends and with all the weapons and stuff. But, the jury's still on that. They have not released it as of the making of this video, so I can't really speak much onto it, but I do know it's coming on later down the road. However, as of now, it sits at an 86 on Metacritic, and I think that is very fair for this game. So I'm going to put it right here in my fairly rated tier. Next up is Death Stranding 2 On the Beach, developed by Kojima Productions and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. Again, the director of this game is Hideo Kojima, who was known for his success in the Metal Gear series. And Death Stranding 2 On the Beach is an action-adventure game, and it is, I would say, it's more of a narrative-driven game with the aspect of the delivery gameplay loop driving that narrative. So it feels more like a cinematic experience, like the original Death Stranding director's cut that I played and I just talked about earlier in this video. It is a narrative. It feels very cinematic, very movie-like you're playing a show or movie. It is very, very well done in that regard. And if you just go online and look at the cast, this should be no surprise, because these are some top-tier actors like Norman Reedus, Leia Simo, Troy Baker, Elle Fanning. All these people, they do an incredible job in delivery, in their acting, voice acting, and just overall narrative building. It's just awesome in this game. And I think it's probably one of the best narrative games that I've ever seen. And it's one of the best looking games with the Decima engine that I've ever seen too. It's photorealistic, and it's just crazy what they can do with games now. It makes me incredibly optimistic going forward too. And remember, my main criticism from the first Death Stranding is it starts slow. The first 5 hours just seems very slow to me. You get to Port Knot and then it picks up. But with this game, you do start in Mexico, which I think is more of a tutorial ground, and then you go to Australia, which is where the bulk of the game is. But once you are in Mexico, you are given a gun right off the bat. So you're given a gun and you give a third-person shooter mission right off the bat, which is very different than the first Death Stranding game. So I think they listened to some feedback from gamers on it kind of being boring at the beginning. And throughout the entire game, you just unlock more things to put into your arsenal to help you along your way. And by the end, you have so much stuff that you can use to help you that it just feels awesome to travel around the map, to do your deliveries, to get the stars up, and just the core gameplay loop. It's hard to put down. Now, I think the big caveat to what I'm saying is I think this game is made for a specific type of gamer and is definitely not going to be enjoyable for everyone. Like, for example, I think if you play Smash Bros or games like that, like multiplayer games, then maybe this might not be your kind of style of game that you're interested into, because you're not going to get the instant gratification of the gameplay loop. It's going to take some time and patience for stuff to develop over time. Now, I'm not knocking the Smash Bros games. I love those games too, and I like that instant gratification too. I just want to warn you before you pick this game up, because it is $70. If you don't like those kind of games, this is more of a long drawn out game, then this game probably would not be up your alley. However, if you do like narrative games, if you do like kind of a long strategic drawn out game, I think you would really enjoy this game. And I think if you also are a big time motion buff, like you like how things look on the screen, this is probably the best game that you can possibly play, because they really killed it with this. I have not seen graphics look like this ever in gaming. So it's probably the best graphical game we have right now. And I've even seen things where they've used this game's photo mode to try to overcome some government systems with ID checks and stuff like that, because of how photorealistic this game is. So it's really insane, and I just recommend it, just looking at pictures of this game and seeing what it looks like, and you'll see it on the screen right now too. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Now, Death Stranding 2 on the beach sits at an 89 Metascore on Metacritic, and I think that's roughly about right. I think it deserves more than that though, and I'm very hesitant to put it up into the underrated tier, because I do think it's gotten a lot of praise and should have won Game of the Year in my opinion this year. But I think I would put it probably at a 92 range, but that's roughly around where it's at 89, so I'm putting it right there in the fairly rated tier. All right, so last but least, Last of Us Part 2. All right, so The Last of Us Part 2 was developed by Naughty Dog and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. And the director of this game is Neil Druckmann, who is known for some of his previous successes and involvement in really great Naughty Dog games like Uncharted 2. So I think everyone knows the setting of The Last of Us at this point, but it is set in the United States in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. And the reason for this apocalypse was the cordyceps fungal infection that would infect people and take over their minds to turn them into zombies. And so there's various factions in response to this who compete for survival in this wasteland. But that's not really the focus of this game. Like, these competing factions are a factor, but I wouldn't say the competing factions are the super big focus of the game. It's more on the micro level with each individual character's actions that I think they are trying to focus on with The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2. So as my friend likes to say, it's more of a character study, and I've come to agree with him on that aspect of what The Last of Us is as a game. Now, as far as the graphical integrity of The Last of Us Part 2, it is a very well done graphical game, and the cinematics are really good too. Now, the problem is the content of these cinematics and the content of where they're going with the narrative direction, where I have problems with this game. And this game also came on with the general woke people saying, you know, why did Ellie have to be gay and whatnot? But for me, that's not really the big issue with the game, the big controversy. The big controversy to me is I feel like Neil Druckmann is doing things that are trying to rile up people who love first Last of Us game. It feels like he's living for those gotcha moments rather than writing a very well directed narrative timeline, narrative arc for each character. Now, before I get into any spoilers, this can serve as a warning for spoilers coming up, but also I kind of want to preface this whole conversation around the character arcs that I understand the narrative choice, okay? And I'm going to say this throughout this whole section of the video. I understand the narrative choice. I just don't really like it that much. Frankly, it makes sense. All the characters and everything that each character does makes a lot of sense to me. And it's very clearly presented, and it's actually presented pretty well. You know, the cinematics it's like watching a movie. It's very well done. It looks great. The graphics are great. The transitions in between scenes, the way they show the characters' faces and how they interact with each other, and the voice acting, all of that is really, 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 really well done. Like, it's top tier. It's what you would expect from a AAA studio. Now, I'm all for developers taking risk, and especially with their narrative direction. And I think the developers knew of the risk here and took a gamble. And I say that gamble didn't really pay off, because I think the collective gamers all around, really the world, I don't think they really liked the twist, okay? And that's completely fine. We have the right to give feedback about that twist and everything. And the developers can say we're wrong, okay? But I don't think that's a wise choice, because we are going to be the ones paying for your game. We're going to be the ones paying for your future games as well. And so really, you should give your consumer what they want rather than trying to trick them and trying to throw them off guard and basically have them guess wrong every time when they're thinking about, oh, what can we expect in part 2 or part 3. And I think a good synonymous situation to this is with Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, the narrative really fell apart towards the end of the show. There's a lot of theories as to why that happened, but I like to take George R.R. Martin's take at basically his word and what he's saying in a very kind of nice way without saying the writers fumbled. And he says when you have a show like this or a book or anything, and you're giving little foreshadowing hints throughout the story, as all good stories do, and your fans start to pick up on those little crumbs that you've placed in your narrative, and they eventually guess like the ending of your book. They're like, oh, this is what happens. You know, Jon Snow becomes the hero of the story, or maybe Daenerys is the hero of the story, and they guess that right. You can't retroactively go back and then say, oh no, Bran's the hero now. Now, I do want to kind of moderate my language here, because I don't think they try to do this in every instance of the game, and I don't think they completely try to throw away the foreshadowing elements of the first game at all. It's really those big decisions they made, and there's specific big decisions. I think of 2 main big decisions that they make that really, really, really throw the narrative off for me. And so I'm going to get into it right now. If you don't want any spoilers, skip ahead at the time stamp on the screen right now. 3, 2, 1. The biggest controversy with the narrative has been when Abby kills Joel in the first part of the game. And of course, Naughty Dog knew that doing this would alienate gamers, be super controversial, because Joel is the character that we played as in the first game. But honestly, I don't even think that is really the gotcha moment that I'm talking about that he uses. It's the fact that Neil makes us play as Abby in the second half of the game that I think it just adds insult to injury. Now, I get it because they humanize Abby in that way, and like seeing the world through her perspective and the things that she's dealing with, especially with the death of her father caused by Joel. Like, and that the fact that Ellie is basically doing the exact same thing, and when they meet at the end, the whole point is that, you know, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth just leaves the whole world blind, which is specifically a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, but is a reference to the Sermon on the Mount by Jesus Christ. And that's not really a bad theme, but I do strongly disagree with the direction they took, making the players play as Abby and cutting the story in half right there in the middle of the game. Especially because you jump backwards in time. So you play up into a point with Ellie, then it stops, and you have to jump back in time and play that exact same time through as Abby. And it's really frustrating because you're sitting on your edge of your seat wondering what's going to happen to Ellie, and then you jump and you're in another timeline. So I know they came out with another version recently, which is more chronologically done, and I would be interested to play that version of the game and see how it is, but I don't know if it really would be as satisfying because of the way the cutscenes are and the way the game is designed. I just don't think it would be as good, you know, because they did make a decision. They made a narrative decision. They executed it the best they could in this way, and I respect that, but I just don't really like it that much, frankly. Especially when you get to play as Abby, all the like abilities that you unlocked and all the stuff that you had as Ellie and you've been playing for a while, it gets reset and you're basically as a new character. With Abby, you have to do it all over again, and that's really frustrating from a gameplay perspective as well. And while I think that it is overrated, I don't think I would put it down too far. In my opinion, I think it deserves to be more in the 80 to 85 range. I think these gotcha moments just have to take it down a peg for me, in my opinion, but I don't think it is necessarily a bad or broken game in any way. So I think rating it lower than that, it would be a little too excessive, and it being kind of in the C plus high 70s range just feels wrong to me, because the cinematics and the core gameplay is very well done, even if the narrative direction that accompanies it is not. So I do think it is a good game, but I don't think it is the best game, and I definitely don't think it should have won Game of the Year. All right, so that completes my tier list. Here it is. Let me know what you guys think down below. Before we go, I have a couple games here that I did play, but I don't think really fit into my tier list, so I'm just going to go over them very quickly. First game is Civilization 7. I did not play the game enough to give it a fair assessment. I really don't have any desire to go pick up the game again. I just thought it was very milquetoast and didn't really hook me at all. The second is kind of weird because it's my second most played game on PSN, but I haven't played it since like March or April of last year. So I think my views on this game are probably outdated. So I decided to leave it off my list. Path of Exile 2, I think I covered this in a previous video, and I'm kind of confused about the state of the game as to where they're going right now. I don't know if it's released or not, or it's still in beta. So I'm kind of confused on that, but I liked the game, and I just think I haven't played it in a while, and my views would probably be outdated. Splitgate 2 is in a confusing development cycle, and it's really hard to list because they've delisted the game and now relisted it, so I'm gonna have to play the new version. I enjoyed the Battle Royale mode that they had for a while there, but the gameplay kind of just felt not really anything great, and I just went back to playing the finals, frankly. Megabonk is a game I played on my Steam Deck, and I had a fun time, but I don't think it's really comparable to anything on this list, so I don't know if it's really something that I can rank. So I decided to leave it off, but it is fun and is more of just a rogue-like indie game that it's really good on the Steam Deck. And hell, if they had a mobile version, I think it'd be fun on mobile, and it's kind of like that game. But yeah, it's a really fun time, and they have a cool leaderboard too. So fun game, supporting indie devs, I'm always willing to do, and I had a good time. Now, Victoria 3, I absolutely adore this game. I love this game, and as someone who has an economics degree, it's kind of really up my alley. The strategy games are kind of hard to fit into these tier lists, so I left it off because I don't know how you can really put a tier list together with Victoria 3 and the finals and Death Stranding 2. You know, they're so different. But if you like strategy games, I recommend Victoria 3. I do think if you like more of a compact strategy like Age of Empires, this game wouldn't be for you because it's more economics focused. Macroeconomics focused. But if you like that kind of stuff, I really strongly recommend Victoria 3, and I think with the new updates, it's just gotten better over time. Destiny 1 and Destiny 2 is just really hard for me to rate to because they're changing, you know, especially with Destiny 2. I played Destiny 2 Renegades, and I thought it was pretty good. I think it's like a 7 out of 10. I thought some of it was kind of weird, and I thought some cutscenes were really good and well done, and some cutscenes were like, who is this person and why are they making out now? Like, you know, and I've never played really any of Destiny 2, so I don't feel it's fair for me to give a complete ranking of Destiny and Destiny 2. So I'm playing through them right now in my spare time, and maybe I'll make a video down the future with these games and let you guys know what I think. But I thought Renegades was pretty good. I don't know if it's worth the price tag, but I thought it was generally good. So as promised, here are my personal top 3 of 2025. I think Arc Raiders at number 3 is very well deserved, and it's another Embark Studios W. I'm falling in love with this studio, and just the interactions with other players and playing with my friends really makes this game just really fun for us, and so many unique experiences we can have game to game interacting with other players. It just feels very fun and rewarding to play this game. So next up is Death Stranding 2 on the Beach. This was my personal 2025 game of the year because it was released this year in 2025. This game was an absolute movie, literally, and just the narrative, the character development, the story, and even the gameplay loop, all of it together just was, I really enjoyed it, and I could not put this game down when I first picked it up. So it is very deserving of second place in my personal top 23, and I think it even has a place in my personal top 10 of all time. So capping off my year in gaming is Elden Ring. Now this game came out in 2022, so it's not my game of the year right now, but it is what everyone says it is. It's an absolute masterpiece. It is so good and so addicting too. And just the feeling of achievement that you get from those Dark Souls games just is exemplified in Elden Ring as well. And I love that. And I've really fallen in love with this genre. So I'm just waiting to see and get more from Software. And they have made a fan of me. And this will also be in my personal top 10 of games, maybe even probably my top 5 or top 3. Well, that's all for today's video. Let me know what you guys think down below. Where am I wrong? What am I missing on these games? Do you agree with my personal top 3? Do you agree with my rankings that I have here? Let me know down below. Like and subscribe this video, and hope to see you guys soon.